Hello, and welcome to the construction of Block 10, Block 14, and Block 39. We're going to do the three blocks together because they all have something called connector corners in them. Our first block, number 10, here is our modern fabric block. Here is block 14, and there is the original fabrics. Here is block 39, and there are the original fabrics. So let's start with a block 10. So it's a fairly simple block. We've got a square in the center, which isn't a square, actually it's a rectangle. So bear in mind that because it's a rectangle, things are going to have slightly different sizes. Why? No one knows. So on your sheet with your cutting instructions, we've taken into account those differences. Just be mindful that the top is this section, the sides are these sections, and the bottom is this section. They'll have slightly different construction. One of the things that we can do though is this flying geese unit, and we can do it with a method called connector corners. Rather than do the 4 at a time or the individual ones, we can do it this method. And this is what we're going to end up is with a piece like this. I don't think it's squared up yet, but let's get to it first. So the first thing is to cut your corners or your squares, and your squares will be called connector corners, and we will draw a line down the center, and that's going to be our sewing line. We're not going to sew either side, we're going to sew right on the line. So that leaves us with fabric in the center there, and no, we really can't use those pieces for anything else in this square. Perhaps another block, but not this one. I'm just going to press that. So I'll press this. I've done one and sewn it on. So I mark the center, I sew from corner to corner, and then I mark it. The other thing I do when I have connector corners is I trim out only this piece here, the center piece. So I'm left with a nice 1/4 inch seam, maybe a little less, but I still have the integrity and the original dimensions of that one. I think we've talked about this once before. So when I put it together, you can see I have a little bit of gold, just the tiniest little bit of gold up the top there. I can trim that off, and that maintains the shape that I need for that block. So let's put another one together. This one we're going to go this way, and we're going to sew it. Got a little stuff there. Let's try that again. Let's get a little spider to put through first. Okay. There we go. And there's my block. Okay. So I will sew that across. Again, I'm sewing right on the line. Get to the end. And then trim that up. So you see I've gone right there, and now we're going to fold that up. Again, I'll give it a press. I'm going to trim that back fabric or the middle fabric. Again, I'll just check here. So I've got, this time I've got just a smidge on that side, so I'll just trim that off. Okay. So that gives us our portion there, our flying geese unit, and we will just trim them up. If need be, we will trim them up to this size, and that will give us our flying geese units for those section. And the rest of it is a fairly simple pieced block with a 9 patch with a border around it. So that's block 10 completed. Let's look at block 14. So there's block 14. Before we get to these connector corners, in this one, we have to build our center. So I've done that, and I've taken our measurements, which is the 3-inch gold. And in this case, I could fold it like this. So this is your other option. We could cut squares, sew them on, fold it back, and then trim it. So this is back to our old square in a square method, and it gives us really good results. I would sew your center portion and then square it up with your pattern. And then you can just sew on those triangles. And that saves a little bit more. There's less waste this way. So again, I'm going to sew this one on there, and I'm just making sure that's in the middle of my block, which is the middle of the red block. So let me press this. So that's the way you're probably more familiar with. And then I would add on my corners. They are created with 2.5-inch squares, and I cut them from a piece of a charm pack that I had. So I've given you the instructions on the 2.5-inch squares. So I took my charm pack, cut it in half, then cut it in quarters, and then took my quarters and cut them in half. So I'm left with these little pieces, and they are big enough to go on either side of the pink. So let's lay that one out. So that's going to go there, that's going to go there, that's going to go there, and this one is going to have the two pieces on like that and like that. So I will square up this section, then I'll sew these on, and I'll have my block, and again I'll just trim my 6.5 when I'm done that. The last block we have is number 39, and again it's a connector corner. In both block 14 and block 39, hello Shiloh, we have using a fabric in the original which is called the chevron. So this is that fabric, and again it gives you a lot of the fabrics that we're using in both the old one and the original fabrics and the new fabrics. So there's golds, there's pinks, there's green, there's some teal. Those are a lot of my colors that I'm using in both ones. But when you see chevron, to differentiate it between different things, I just want you to know what the original fabric looked like. It's quite lovely. So you pick which fabric you want to use in your block, whether you want to use a multicolored one or not. So here is our block. Our connector corners, or our centers there, are going to be used there. So in this one, we have our center block cut at 3 by 3, which is going to give us that full square section. So we did the triangles in block 14. We did the connector corners for flying geese in block 10. And now in this one, again, we'll fold it, or we'll mark it with a pen, and we will sew that diagonal. And then we will sew the next diagonal. So I can do this from the same, while the fabric's still in there. I can just put it in the opposite corner. I line it up with the edges, and I put it in and sew it across. Trim that, stick that back in. So the same sort of square in a square is here as well. So I'm just going to press that. And this one is going to be a fussy cut center. And again, when I trim my connector corners, I only am going to trim the inside fabric, maintaining the integrity and the size of the I think it's 3 by 3 or 3.5 by 3.5 inch square in the center there. So that's that. We'll do these other two. So line them up with the two outside edges here and here. So we line them up there and there. And again, we can press it or we can draw a line on it to get us our corner to corner mark. See that little line there that we've added by pressing, finger pressing? And we sew. And again, we can sew this one while that block is still on there. We line up the two. Oh, let's fold it first and get our diagonal. So we're staying true. There's our nice crease that we're going to follow when we sew. Put this on here. And sew across there. And let me again do a press. And there we have our center. Again, if I want to make sure it's the right size, there's a little bit of trimming that I need to do to that block, but it keeps that size. And of course I will trim off those center ones. Then I continue to make my block, which is basically just adding borders, borders, borders. So that is block 39. And that is the beauty of connector corners. They make it easier sometimes than just adding triangles. Something like block 14 with those triangles, we do have the opportunity to square up and make sure that our points are going to line up really well, like these two, not like these two. So when I trim this one, I will make sure that all my points have the 1/4 inch on them. Block 10, we use the connector corners to make our flying geese. And in block 39, we used our connector corners to do our square and a square. And that's connector corners. Thank you.